It's a funny thing, memory. Most people think of it as a film reel you can play back, but it's not. It's a collage, torn and pasted and painted over. I've lived in my grandfather's house for 3 years now, and I've learned to appreciate the silence. The nearest neighbor is a half-mile down a dirt road, and the woods that surround this place swallow sound whole. But it wasn't always silent. In the beginning, there was the train. I came here to escape. The city had become a pressure cooker of noise, expectations, and the ghost of a relationship that had imploded in slow motion. When my grandfather, a man I'd only known through my mother's fragmented stories, passed away and left me this house in rural Montana, it felt like a release valve. A 2-story timber-framed house, perched on a hill overlooking a valley that was green in the summer and a sea of white in the winter. It was old, it smelled of pine and dust, and it was mine. The first week was a blur of unpacking boxes and rediscovering muscles I hadn't used in a decade of desk work. I'd spend my days fixing leaky faucets, sanding down old furniture, and my nights on the porch, nursing a beer and watching the stars blaze in a sky untainted by city lights. The quiet was absolute. The only sounds were the wind whispering through the pines and the occasional, distant cry of a coyote. It was a perfect, healing solitude. That's why the sound, when it first came, was so jarring. It was the end of my second week. I was in bed, reading an old paperback I'd found on a shelf, the kind with a cracked spine and yellowed pages. It was late, probably just past 1 a.m. A low, deep rumble started, so faint I thought it was my imagination. It was a vibration more than a sound, a feeling in my teeth and the floorboards. Then it grew, steadily, into a familiar rhythm, the rhythmic clatter of steel wheels on a track. A train. I put my book down, listening. It grew louder, a crescendo of grinding metal and the powerful chug of a heavy locomotive. It sounded close, frighteningly close. The house was built in the 1920s. I couldn't imagine an architect putting a foundation down this near to a freight line. The windows rattled in their frames. A glass of water on my nightstand trembled, concentric rings disturbing its surface. For a full minute, the noise was immense, a deafening roar that filled the entire valley. And then, just as quickly as it had built, it faded, leaving a profound, ringing silence in its wake. I sat there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. A train. It made no sense. The real estate agent, a talkative local woman named Brenda, had made a point of mentioning the area's tranquility. The old Great Northern Line that used to run through the valley was decommissioned in the 70s, she'd said, gesturing vaguely towards the woods. They pulled the tracks up for scrap back in '82. Nothing but peace and quiet out here now. I must have misheard. Or maybe there was a different, active line further away, and the sound had just traveled in a strange way on the night air. I tried to rationalize it. I was tired, stressed from the move. My mind was probably playing tricks on me. I eventually fell into an uneasy sleep, the ghost of the sound still echoing in my ears. The next night, I was waiting for it. I tried to pretend I wasn't, going about my routine, but a part of my mind was cocked and listening. I made a pot of coffee, sat in the dark living room, and stared out the large picture window that overlooked the valley. 1:11 a.m., the exact same time as the night before. The hum began. This time I was ready. I went to the window, pressing my face close to the cold glass. The sound swelled, the same bone-jarring crescendo. I scanned the darkness, the moonlit expanse of trees, and the faint outline of the opposite ridge. Nothing. No lights.
No massive, snaking form of a freight train. Just the sound. A sound that was so physically present it felt like a phantom limb, an auditory hallucination shared by the house itself. The floorboards vibrated, the air grew thick and heavy. For that one intense minute, the world was nothing but that impossible noise. And then, silence. 1:12 a.m. My obsession began then. The next morning, I drove into the small town of Prairie Bend. The town library was a small brick building with a kindly, elderly librarian who seemed thrilled to have a visitor. I asked her about old railway maps. She led me to a dusty back room filled with local archives. For hours, I pored over brittle, yellowed maps. Brenda had been right. The Great Northern Line had cut right through the valley, no more than 200 yards from where my grandfather's house stood. and the records confirmed it. The line was officially abandoned in 1978, and a local contractor had been paid to remove every last steel rail and wooden tie in the summer of 1982. There were even grainy photographs in the local paper of men in flannel shirts prying the tracks from the earth. I felt a knot of ice in my stomach. It wasn't just my imagination. That afternoon, I put on my hiking boots and went looking for the old railway bed. It wasn't hard to find. A wide, flat clearing cut a perfectly straight line through the dense forest, an unnatural corridor now overgrown with weeds and young saplings. I walked it for miles, first in one direction, then the other. There was nothing. No rotted ties, no discarded spikes, not a single trace of the iron road that had once existed here. Just a ghost of a path. That night, the train came again. 1:11 a.m. The roar, the shaking, the sudden silence. It was a ritual, an appointment I was being forced to keep.
My nearest neighbor was a man named Elias Thorne, a grizzled old rancher who lived in a ramshackle house further down the road. I'd only seen him once, driving a rusted-out Ford pickup. A few days later, I caught him mending a fence and decided to approach. I tried to be casual. "Hey," I started. "Bit of a weird question for you. You ever hear a train at night?" Elias stopped his work and looked at me. His eyes were pale blue, weathered by years of sun and wind. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He spat a stream of chewing tobacco onto the dirt. "Some things you're better off not listening for," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. He turned his back to me and went back to his fence, a clear dismissal. The conversation was over. His reaction wasn't a denial, it was a warning, and that was far more terrifying. Sleep was a luxury I could no longer afford. The anticipation of the train kept me awake long before it arrived, and the ringing silence after it passed kept me awake long after. I was jumpy, irritable. My days were spent in a state of low-grade dread, my nights in a state of high alert. The house, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, a private, nightly haunting. I decided I needed proof. My sanity required it. I ordered a set of high-sensitivity audio recorders and a pair of motion-activated trail cameras, the kind hunters use. When they arrived, I felt a surge of purpose. I was no longer a passive victim. I was an investigator. I spent an afternoon setting up my equipment. I placed one camera on my porch, aimed directly at the old railway bed in the woods. I strapped the second camera to a large pine tree right on the edge of the phantom path itself. I placed one audio recorder in my bedroom to capture the sound as I heard it, and another outside, near the tree line.
That night, I huddled in my bed, the covers pulled up to my chin like a child. But this time, I had an anchor. The little red recording light on the audio device next to my bed was a tiny beacon of rationality in the encroaching madness. The house was dead quiet. Then, at 1:11 a.m., the floor began to hum. The roar was different this time, or maybe I was just listening differently. Beneath the grinding and the clatter, I could hear something else, a high-pitched metallic screeching, like brakes being tortured. It was an ugly, agonizing sound that set my teeth to edge. The house shook more violently than ever before. A framed picture fell off the wall in the hallway with a sharp crash. It lasted for what felt like an eternity, and when it finally stopped, the silence that crashed down was heavier, more oppressive than ever. I waited until the sun was fully up before I dared to retrieve my equipment. My hands were trembling as I bring the cameras and recorders inside. I plugged the first memory card into my laptop, my heart pounding. I clicked open the audio file from the recorder in my bedroom. I put on my headphones and pressed play. It was all there. The silence, the initial hum, and then chaos, a wall of white noise, a hurricane of static, so loud and distorted it made me rip the headphones off. There was no train, no rhythmic clatter. It was just pure digital screaming. The file from the outdoor recorder was the same, only louder, more violent. It sounded like the world was being torn apart. Then I checked the cameras. The one on my porch had captured nothing. The video was dark, and at exactly 1:11 a.m., there was a single corrupted frame, a flash of green and purple digital blocks, and then nothing.
The sound file attached to it was the same, deafening static. My hope sank. It was the last camera, the one I had strapped to the tree, that held the real horror. I played the file. The video showed the empty, moonlit railway bed.
The timestamp in the corner clicked to 1:11:11. The image flickered. For a single second, the clearing was filled with a blinding, strobing light. The video glitched, breaking into 1,000 pixelated squares. And in those corrupted frames, I could see them. It wasn't a train. It was movement. Shapes. For a fraction of a second, the glitching image resolved into something sickeningly clear. A face. A pale, gaunt face. Its mouth open in a silent oval of a scream. Its eyes wide with a terror I couldn't comprehend. It was pressed against what looked like a window, but it was gone before my brain could fully process it. Another glitch. Another face. This one of a woman, her hair wild. Then another, a child. They were like old sepia-toned photographs flickering in and out of existence, embedded in the digital noise. A procession of spectral, horrified faces, trapped in the machine. I slammed the laptop shut. I stumbled back from the table, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was cold, so cold. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't a ghost train. This was something else, something broken. A wound in the world that bled noise and fear every night at 1:11 a.m. And my house, my sanctuary, was sitting right on the edge of it. I couldn't run. That was my first, most pathetic realization. Where would I go? Back to the city? To the life I had fled? To tell people that my house was being haunted by a data-corrupting ghost train filled with screaming faces? They'd lock me up. Elias Thorne's words echoed in my head. Some things you're better off not listening for. He knew. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was real, and he knew to leave it alone. But I couldn't. It was in my house. It was in my head. I had looked into its eyes. For a week, I was a ghost in my own home. I barely ate. I slept on the couch in the living room, as far from the bedroom that overlooked the tracks as I could get. But it didn't matter. At 1:11 a.m., the sound came. The house shook.
And I would lie there, curled into a ball, and see the faces from the video behind my eyelids. A strange kind of resolve began to form in the hollow space where my fear had been. A cold, hard anger. I wasn't going to be driven from my home by a phantom. I wasn't going to live in terror. I had to face it. I didn't know what that meant or what I would do, but I knew I couldn't spend another night cowering on the couch. I had to go outside. I had to stand on that old railway bed and see what passed in the dark. The day of my decision was clear and freezing. I spent the afternoon preparing, though I wasn't sure what I was preparing for. I dressed in my warmest clothes, thermal underwear, 2 pairs of wool socks, insulated boots, a heavy coat, a hat, and gloves. I filled a thermos with hot black coffee. As dusk fell, I grabbed a powerful flashlight, its beam cutting a sharp white circle in the growing darkness, and I walked out of my house and into the woods. I found my spot easily. The tree where I had mounted the camera. I stood right in the middle of the overgrown path, the place where the phantom rails should be. The silence of the forest was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was predatory. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of a dead leaf, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I checked my watch. 12:45 a.m. The waiting was the worst part. The cold was biting, seeping through my layers of clothing. My breath plumed in the flashlight beam. I paced back and forth, a tiny 10-foot patch of ground, trying to keep the blood flowing in my legs. The moon was a sliver, offering little light. The world was shades of black and deep gray. My watch read 1:10 a.m. I stopped pacing. I stood dead center in the path, feet planted, and waited. My heart was a frantic drum. Then it began. Not the sound, not yet. The feeling, a strange, low-frequency hum that started in the soles of my feet. The ground itself was vibrating.
a deep, resonant thrum that grew in intensity until my whole body was shaking with it. The air grew impossibly cold, a sudden, shocking drop in temperature that felt like stepping into a walk-in freezer. A thick, oppressive pressure built in the air, making it hard to breathe. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Then I saw it. Far down the straight line of the path, a light. But it wasn't the warm, yellow headlight of a locomotive. It was a cold, brilliant blue-white glow, and it didn't cast a beam. The light itself was the source, pulsing, strobing like a faulty neon sign. And it was coming fast. The sound hit me a second later, the screeching, tearing static from my recordings, but 1,000 times louder. It wasn't a sound I heard with my ears. It was a physical assault. It vibrated through my bones, my skull, my teeth. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it did nothing to stop it. The light grew, bathing the woods in its horrific, strobing glare. And in that light, I saw the source of the noise. It wasn't a train. It was a procession. A river of shimmering, translucent shapes marching down the path. They were human figures, dozens, maybe hundreds of them, flowing like water, their bodies overlapping and indistinct. They were made of the same pale, strobing light. As they drew level with me, I could see their faces, the same faces from the video, gaunt, pale, mouths wide in silent screams that were lost in the overwhelming digital roar. Their eyes were fixed forward, seeing nothing. They were trapped in a loop, a silent, eternal march of terror. I was standing in the middle of a river of ghosts, and the current was pulling at me. The light was blinding. The noise was shattering. I felt a profound physical wrench, as if my own soul was being torn loose from my body, trying to join the horrific parade. I saw a hand, ghostly and translucent, reach out towards me from the river of light.
I squeezed my eyes shut, fell to my knees and screamed, a raw, primal sound that was instantly swallowed by the impossible noise. And then, the world went black. I woke to the gentle warmth of the morning sun on my face. My first coherent thought was that I was cold, a deep, penetrating cold that had settled into my bones. I was lying on my back in the middle of the railway bed, my clothes stiff with frost. My flashlight was a few feet away, its lens cracked. My thermos had rolled into a ditch, a dark stain on the frozen leaves. Of the night's events, I had only a fractured, nightmarish memory. I stumbled back to the house on legs that felt like wood. Every muscle ached. I let myself in and stood in the living room, shivering uncontrollably. The house was silent. It was a different.
Most of it was mundane. Notes on the weather, the price of lumber, repairs to the house. But the last few pages were different. The handwriting was shaky, erratic. He wrote about his wife's passing and the profound loneliness that followed. And then he wrote about the train. His descriptions mirrored my own experience perfectly. The sound, the shaking, the time. He called it the sorrow line. He had spoken to the oldest residents in town, people who were now long gone. They told him a story, a piece of local folklore that had been deliberately buried. In 1893, a mining company had been laying that very track. They were using a large, hastily assembled crew of immigrant laborers, mostly Irish and Chinese, who were paid little and housed in a makeshift camp near the valley. A cholera outbreak swept through the camp. The company, fearing a panic and a halt to their work, covered it up. They didn't provide doctors. They just kept the men working until they collapsed. At night, to dispose of the bodies and hide the scale of the tragedy, they would load the dead onto a flatbed work train and take them miles down the line to be buried in an unmarked mass grave. The last entry in the journal was dated the night before my grandfather had a stroke. He wrote, "The sorrow line came again tonight. It was louder than ever. I saw their faces in the windows. They are not ghosts of a train. They are ghosts of a tragedy, forever marching to their unmarked grave. The folklore says the line only reveals itself to those who are truly alone,
to those whose sorrow echoes its own. I believe it, and I am so very, very alone. I closed the journal. The pieces of the collage clicked into place. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't been alone in my experience. I now live in the truest silence I have ever known. The train is gone, but sometimes, when the wind blows through the pines just right, I can almost hear a low, humming vibration in the floorboards. I know now what Elias Thorne meant. Some things you are better off not listening for, because once you hear them, they become a part of your silence.